Hi everyone. Can you believe that we're now a third of the way through the semester and that it's week 4 already? So at this point in the semester, you should really be thinking about assessment 2, which is your multimedia presentation. Hopefully by now your facilitators have had a chance to at least have an initial talk with you about this assessment. And I'm sure that over the next 2 weeks that there'll be some further conversations around this. So I thought, being week 4, that this was a great time to sort of do this little video just to address some of the questions and concerns that we're getting about this assessment. So I just thought I'd put this together for you and help you to sort of think about this assessment a little bit further. So in this particular assessment, many of you are probably thinking, well, why are we doing something like a site visit and a multimedia presentation? And there's a couple of reasons why we've carefully selected this assessment. So the first reason why we're doing this type of assessment is to give you an actual opportunity to go and see for yourselves the diversity of organisations that are working in the public health space. So that's one of the reasons. The other is to give you the opportunity to see how principles of public health are actually applied in practice in real organisations with real practitioners, working with real communities and real populations and real individuals. And so, you come into class and you go through the online materials and we talk about these concepts of, public health values like equity and social justice and empowerment. We talk about domains and spheres of public health practice, things like prevention and protection and health promotion and monitoring and surveillance. We've talked about things like determinants of health and vulnerable groups, but students are often left wondering, but what does that actually look like? How do we actually translate these concepts into practice? So this assessment, getting you out into organisations and looking at what these organisations do, is one of the ways that we can help you to actually see what it looks like. The other reason why we do this assessment is to help you to engage with technology. So for most of you, your disciplines have a set of competencies that you're required to meet, before you go out and start working. And there are even a set of competencies more broadly for public health practitioners. All of these competencies in some ways talk about engaging with technology. And so, you've all done a stand up and deliver to the class style of presentation, where you've come in with, maybe a PowerPoint and some notes and you've talked at an audience. A multimedia presentation, is a different style of presenting information. It requires a set of different skills. And so, what we want to do is give you an opportunity to develop those technology skills, for collecting, for analysing and for disseminating information, so that you can achieve those discipline-related competencies. The other reason why we do a site visit in this subject is also for students specifically enrolled in the Bachelor of Health Science who in third year, need to identify a suitable organisation to undertake their field placement. And so there's a real opportunity with this assessment for students to start exploring some of those possibilities. I do also just want to draw your attention back to the subject intended learning outcomes. So all of the work that we do in class, that you do online, and all of your assessments are helping you to reach these 4 learning outcomes. And in this assessment, you'll be required to critically analyse different concepts, values and strategies relating to public health. Very clearly says in the instructions that you need to show how these principles are being demonstrated or not within the organisation that you're undertaking your site visit with. You're working towards outlining conflicting roles and interests held by various stakeholders. So again, in this multimedia presentation, you need to identify who are the stakeholders that the organisation is working with. Is there anybody missing, that they're not engaging with who they should be? Looking at whether there's some conflict there, and then what implications does that have for the practice of that particular organisation. You are critically articulating the applicability of various strategies engaged by public health practitioners. So we're asking you in this assessment to think about, well, what are the types of activities, and being critical of those in terms of things like affordability, accessibility and availability. And then the last outcome is around examining the limits of public health practice as a discipline, with regards to working with vulnerable communities. And so in this assessment, you also need to, identify some of the limitations of the work that's being undertaken within your organisation, and need to make some recommendations around those. So that's the reason why we're getting you to do this particular assessment. What constitutes a site visit? So I know some of you, some of the groups that I've been talking to, people have already identified an organisation, but are perhaps not quite sure how to go about doing the site visit. So I guess there's a couple of ways you can do it. One is in person, so actually going physically to an organisation, and going and talking to people who work there, having a look around, paying attention to what's happening obviously inside the four walls of the organisation, but equally paying attention to what's happening on the outside. So things like signage, things like parking, access to transport, etc. So just paying attention to those things. The other option you have is doing a website visit. So lots of organisations, maybe don't have an actual physical office, but they certainly do have a web presence. And even if they have a physical site, they also have a web presence as well. And so you can get a lot of information, for this assessment from looking at the website, looking at things like, strategic plans, having a look at things like annual reports or any other documents that they may have available on their website. And you can also do a combination of these. So as I say, that there's lots of organisations who, may have sort of a local site, but also have a website that is much more overarching, perhaps at a state or even a national level. So you can utilise a combination of these approaches to address this assessment. The other thing is you can't get all of the answers that you need for this assessment just from going to the agency. You will need to tap into some additional resources. That might be, for example, looking at the local government website in order to be able to identify what is the local government area. Looking at local government or things like the Australian Bureau of Statistics for information around demographics of that particular LGA. You might want to look at the Department of Health, such as the state and federal departments, organisations like the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, collect a lot of data around Australia's health. So you might want to tap into some of that information. And also don't forget that there are journal articles and textbooks and other reports or even electronic sources that you can be tapping into, particularly when you're trying to make those links to public health principles. So you will need to draw on a range of resources. Whatever resources that you are drawing on, of course, need to be referenced appropriately. If you're not familiar with referencing, then the first place that I would direct you to is the library referencing tool. But don't forget that there's also support through the peer learning advisors, which are located in the libraries on each campus. The presentation itself, so there is no in-class presentation. Your multimedia presentation will not be made publicly available. The only person or people who will see your multimedia presentation is your facilitator and the other facilitators in order to do a marking moderation process. So they won't be publicly available, but what we may ask is once they've been assessed, we might approach students asking for permission to use their assessments in future years to show students other examples. You are required to use, obviously this is multimedia and multi means more than one, you will be required to use things like videos or photos or animations. You could use sound clips, you could use cartoons, you could take screenshots of things, you can use things like Google Maps. There needs to be a visual element to your presentation. And the other requirement that we have is that there is some voiceover. So just as I'm doing a voiceover with a PowerPoint, you can see that this, in effect, is a multimedia presentation. You can record your presentation, in a number of ways. You could use your phone or your laptop or any other mobile device that has a recording function. You can use Zoom, so I'm using Zoom now to record this particular presentation. As students at the university, you have access to Zoom. So Zoom allows you to do a presentation and capture that screen. You can see that I have set this particular presentation up with obviously the PowerPoint, but also the visual image of me up in the corner. If you're going to use Zoom, you don't have to have you in the corner. That's totally up to you, as long as we've got the voiceover and some other visual. There are instructions on LMS for how to download and then use Zoom, so please have a look at those. Those are available in the assessments folder with all of the other details for this particular assessment. The other option you've got is to use the One Button Studios, and these are available on each campus. The One Button Studios are set up so that you can have the PowerPoint in the back and you stand in front of the screen. So it captures you and the PowerPoint, and it's literally as easy as hitting one button to record and the one button to stop recording, and you're able to download that onto a USB or your OneDrive as well. Whatever method you want to use, as I say, go back to LMS for instructions for how to do that. So you can see here on the screen that I've just highlighting where those instructions are. There is also some information there around video editing software that you can use. It's not a requirement for this assessment, but if you've got the skills and you want to edit, there's some options there for you to look into. And the other thing that we have provided instructions for is how to upload your presentation to LMS. So there's a couple of ways you can do that. One is if you're doing something like a PowerPoint presentation and you're just recording it on your laptop or mobile device, you can try and upload that as a PowerPoint document. Some students had great success with that last year, others didn't. They found that the file was too big, in which case using one of the other methods that's listed here, so YouTube for example, what you can do is upload any recording to your YouTube channel, and then all you need to provide is the URL link in a Word document and submit that to LMS. Just make sure that your video is set to public so that we're able to access that when we click on your URL. There are also instructions there if you would like to use OneDrive. As I say, there's not a preferred method, although what we have found in the past is that YouTube seems to be the easiest and most reliable way. If you've got any questions, I'm hoping this answers some of the questions or concerns that you might have. If you've got any other questions, please feel free to talk to your facilitators. If they're not sure of the answer, they may direct your query to me. In whatever way you ask a question, whether it's through them or through me or even through the LMS discussion boards, we endeavour to get back to you as soon as we possibly can. I will be monitoring the discussion boards closely in the lead up to this assessment. Your facilitators this week, over the next week, will be showing you an example of one of the multimedia presentations from last year. Just be mindful that this is only one example. It's not necessarily the only way to do this assessment, but we acknowledge that some students just need to see an example to get themselves started. This example one will not be made available on LMS. It will only be shown under the direct supervision of your workshop facilitators. So please do not ask your facilitators to make copies of this available, because the answer will be no. It is only going to be shown in the workshops. So with that, I wish you all the very best for this assessment. I'm really looking forward to seeing which organisations you go out and visit, and also looking really forward to seeing your multimedia presentations and what you do with those. And so, yeah, all the best, everybody, and thank you.